My dear friend Carl Zha is here for our monthly conversation. In addition to this, why I'm excited a little bit, because I'm getting better, so I can talk now. So anyway, excited to be with you guys, and thank you, Carl, for being here, man.
Thank you for inviting me, as always, David.
Of course. Everybody expects you in this community here because they enjoy and also learning from your knowledge and so forth. So without further ado, we're going to jump in because we got a lot to cover, Carl, and I like to have your insights and inputs about really a host of issues. So I would like to start, first of all, with your assessment overall. How did you see and still seeing the U.S.-Israeli-Iran conflict?
Well, Israel did not win this round. I mean, despite a lot of people saying, "Oh, Israel clearly won because they took out the top Iranian leadership, they killed the Iranian scientists, they did more damage to Iranian infrastructure." But look, war is not won by merely numbers. War is won also by the will to pursue war. This is what Vietnamese understood in the war to push the Americans out of their country. They understood that they can take more pain than the Americans. Because the Vietnam War issue is actually not an existential issue for United States. Mm-hmm. So they would not fight as hard as the Vietnamese do. And the Vietnamese were able to, they were willing to take a lot more pain and suffer through it in order to come to achieve their objective, which is liberation of their country. The difference between Iran and Israel is Iran is a much larger country. It actually has strategic depth. So it's like, like Iran can definitely take more pain than Israel. I mean, I use an analogy of a boxing match with Muhammad Ali. One of the reasons Muhammad Ali is so good, not only he's stung like a bee, but he can absorb a lot of punches. He can take punishment. Yeah. And this is Israel can't. Israel, because it does not have strategic depth. All its cities are clustered together. And on top of that, Israeli economy was already on the brink of collapse because its pursuit of genocide in Gaza in last year and its aggression against Lebanon. And at this critical juncture, when Iranian missiles are raining down on Tel Aviv, on Haifa, people in Israel, they can no longer pretend they can have a normal life in Israel. And that's important because most of the Israelis that have multiple passports, they have somewhere to go. And when the shit hit the fan, most of them will leave. And they did. And the Israeli government was trying to put a clampdown on that. But you cannot run a settler colonial country without settlers. When settlers are leaving, that's not going to work. And as the time went on, we saw that Iron Dome system and the U.S. THAAD system became increasingly ineffective because they're running out of interceptor missiles. And Iranian missile barrage keep on coming. And even if the numbers they send have reduced, but more missiles are finding their target because obviously Israelis, they start to ration their interceptor missiles and decide when to use them. The issue with the missile defense is you're using bullet to shoot on the bullets, but what if the other side decide to rain bullets from the sky like a hailstorm? Any kind of missile defense system can be overwhelmed with enough missiles. And Iran has tens of thousands of missiles. And if they keep this going, we already saw reports from Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, etc., that says Israel will be running out of interceptor missiles in a week. This is why Israel sued for peace. They approached Trump to ask for the ceasefire. And what Israel had tried to do in the beginning is they tried to drag the United States into the war because they know they cannot take on Iran alone by themselves. They don't have the capability for it. So there was tremendous pressure through the Israeli lobby to push the Trump administration to do to wage a full-on war on Iran on behalf of Israel. What Trump did, he decided, he understand going to war, another war in Middle East is immensely unpopular with the recent experience in Iraq, Afghanistan still fresh on American memory.
Yeah.
So he decided to threaten. I called this, when I had a show with Jamar Thomas a week ago, before the ceasefire took place. I said the most likely case is Trump is going to do a symbolic glancing blow against Iranian nuclear facility, and then he was going to claim victory, and then he will ask for his Nobel Peace Prize, and that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did, because now we know that U.S. actually have warned Iran several days in advance that we're gonna strike here. Please don't retaliate. We're gonna strike here, but it's just for show. And then same thing when Iran did retaliate against the U.S. base in Qatar. They also let the U.S. know in advance. Okay, just get your ships out of the way. We're gonna do this to satisfy our national honor. We know you said don't retaliate, but we're Iran. We're a proud nation. We gotta retaliate. So just make sure you scamper your ships. So this is all this was managed. This is a managed show. And for Trump, that got kind of Israeli lobby off his back, because he can claim, hey, I did my thing. I stood by Israel.
And that's it.
Israel, America, it's great. I did everything, and I destroyed Iran nuclear program. Give me a Nobel Peace Prize. And we know that's bogus, because from satellite pictures that showed the strike on Fordo enrichment plant, they just make a couple of holes, make a couple of craters, and by math and physics, we know those bunker busters alone, they could not penetrate 80 meters depth into the mountainside. So what Trump administration claim in their briefing, they say, oh, we did this Top Gun Maverick move. Like, we totally moved 6 B-2 bombers on top of each other, and we fired this precision bunker buster, one on top of each other. They all went in the same hole, all 6 of them. And the compilation effect penetrated the bunker. Come on, Maverick, Top Gun is a movie. Okay, I don't believe they did any of that. Right now, we can only take their words for it. But I think what we do know is the bunker buster of that size usually create enormous craters. But from what we saw in satellite picture, that doesn't seem to be the case. And we also know that U.S. also fired Tomahawk cruise missiles from their ships, and so I suspect. I mean, I don't even know if they actually risk flying 6 B-2s into Iran, because for mission. I mean, for a symbolic a glancing blow strike, it doesn't make sense to risk your precious assets, to risk a shoot down. Imagine the embarrassment if a B-2 got shot down by Iranian air defense. That would be so just be so much embarrassment. So my guess is that might not even be B-2 bombing. That might just be cruise missiles, the Tomahawk cruise missiles. And we know for sure Tomahawk cruise missiles would not be able to penetrate that depth. Anyway, this whole thing is a stage show for the public, for the Israelis, so Trump can get back to deport immigrants back in the United States. So Israel did not win this round. They were firing off. They were firing off a lot of interceptor missiles, and they're running into a supply constraint, because guess what? They need to be supplied by Americans, and those THAAD missiles, each THAAD interceptor missile costs between $12 to $13 million, right? And each THAAD battery, the launcher, the radar, the entire system, it costs $1 billion with a B. Now, people are saying, the money doesn't matter. Israel get them for free anyway, and Uncle Sam can always print money. But Uncle Sam can print as much money as they want. but can they print missiles? Can they print missile
Yeah.
production? The
Yeah.
answer obviously is
Indeed.
no, because I saw the estimate. They fire either somewhere between 12 to 36 32 THAAD missiles during the course of 12 days. The U.S. production of THAAD missiles scheduled for 2012 is 12 missile interceptors. So Israel fired off more than a year's worth of production. Yeah, in 12 days. They're not going to be able to keep that up.
No.
And the U.S. planned production, that was planned before the Chinese put the export control on the rare earth. and guess what? That export control is not going away. Right now, any American company who need access to Chinese rare earth or Chinese rare earth heat-resistant magnet, which is used in F-35 and the missiles, they need to write an application to the Chinese Commerce Ministry and says, sir, can I please have some rare earth export? And the tariff war talk that was resolved in London, China agreed to grant export license for 6 months to a group of American car makers, but they did not make any promise about Lockheed Martin. As far as we know, the Chinese ban on rare earth to U.S. military industrial complex is still that's still on.
But Carl, why will China even agree to that? Why will China agree to that, given that we're gonna turn back and stab them in the back?
I'll address that question, because people need to understand this. China, I talk about this in our last show. China actually don't want to destroy United States. China actually do not want to cripple the U.S. economy. Right now, at that time, the rare earth export was control was so crippling that U.S. car makers were thinking about moving their car production to China because they can't access those rare earth materials or the magnets. But because the Chinese export control law currently do not cover parts that contain those magnets, so the U.S. car maker were seriously making plans to move their whole car production to China, even with the high tariff that Trump is putting out. So at least they can make cars. But China decided to relax export control against those U.S. car makers because, again, China is not interested to cripple U.S. economy. Oh, at least not yet. Not at this moment. Even with the tariff war, U.S. remains the third export destination for Chinese goods. So the top one is ASEAN. The top Chinese trading partner is ASEAN. The second one is EU. Now United States have become number 3. But still, China don't want to kill its customers, right? It doesn't make sense for China to kill its customers. All China wants is to have U.S. come back to do trade. It's normal nations. Basically, you have this is the scenario now. United States is this crazy guy, who goes to Wendy's and make a big rant like, oh, we're gonna war, we're gonna destroy you, we're gonna sit on a throne of Chinese skulls. That's what the U.S. Defense Secretary actually said, by the way. And the Chinese will be like, sir, this is a Wendy's. Just make your order for burgers and get out. and China just want to have a normal trade relationship. They're not interested in to destroy United States. Why destroy your customers? That doesn't make sense. But the export control on U.S. defense industry remains on because that actually makes sense. And U.S. cannot make those they depend on a particular critical mineral called samarium. Now, U.S. do have a samarium mine in Washington, but it was already closed down. And so, but they do have those mineral resources. People say, we just gotta get rid of our environmental regulations and mine and drill, baby, drill. Just mine, baby, mine. But even that's not going to work because
It's not going to work.
it's not about mining. China only mine about 60% of the world's critical minerals, but China process over 90% of the critical mineral. The processing is the key. It's because originally, all the West, including U.S., decided to offsource all these mining of critical minerals to China because it's incredibly polluting. So they essentially offsource all their pollutions to China. But in the 1980s and 1990s, China was very poor. So it was willing to do the dirty job, literally, to mine those minerals. But when that happened, then China decided to move up the technology tree. They move up the value chain by also building on the processing, and all the Western companies, they help China doing that because it makes sense, because there's not that much money in actually making those rare earth product. So like they're perfectly happy with China both mine and processing it. Now in 2025, it's been over 40 years. There has been multiple generation of the evolution of the technology of refining rare earth. The technology to make those heat resistant magnet from the rare earth today is not the same as they were back in 1980s. And guess what? All these technological innovation took place in China. So today, the technology, the machine tools involved in processing rare earth into magnets, they're all Chinese. This is why even when they dig out the critical minerals in Australia, in America, guess what? They're still sending them to China for processing. Wow. because US does not have the processing capability. So this is a real chokehold that China has. And China can decide who gets them. And so China did a global ban, global export control, because they understand even if they export it to Europe or Japan, they will just set up front company to divert the supply to the United States. And this is why India is complaining right now, because they got caught. They caught the stray because India is complaining China is putting the critical mineral ban on them because it's a global ban. So what China did right now is they decided to relax the export control, but only extend to civilian industries. For those critical minerals that's crucial for military application, it's still very strict. I mean, that ban hasn't been lifted. So Israel and the United States are facing a real critical supply issue. They're not able to replenish those ammunitions and missiles that's been depleted very quickly. And we know they were already low on inventory before Israel started their strike, because the United States has been sending a lot of missiles to Ukraine. And now we're down to the point that U.S. does not have enough missiles for itself. I saw a guy on Twitter ranting, it's like, oh my God, why are we wasting THAAD missiles in Israel? Those precious THAAD missiles could help us defend our aircraft carriers. War against China. And I'm like, dude, you don't get it. Like, if those THAAD missiles is not effective to block out the Iranian missile barrage, you have no chance against China. Because compared to Iran, China have a lot more missiles, a lot more advanced missiles, and China literally makes their anti-ship ballistic missiles in lights off, automated factory run by robots, so they can make them 24/7 rolling off this assembly line. And China do not have a supply issue with the materials. They have all the resources. They have all the resources to make those missiles, and they have all the technology to make to go burr in the missile production. It's a fantasy that U.S. think they can confront China in that way. And this also I think this conflict show a couple of things. One is obviously to have a large missile force is probably very cost effective. Drones and missiles are very cost effective. You see, I saw a video of Israeli F-16 flying in the Syrian airspace, shooting down a Iranian Shahed 139 drone.
That is correct.
And it was hailed as a great success. I'm like, wait a minute. That Iranian drone costs anywhere between $20,000 to $40,000. It uses literally like the motorcycle engine to power it. Iran can crank that out, no problem.
Yeah.
Whereas the Python missiles that Israeli use, that's a $400,000 missile. How many can you make? How, again, it's a problem. It's asymmetric warfare. You are not. This is the same issue on Ukraine. All this expensive NATO hardware is getting blown up by cheap drones that Russia made with the help of Iranian technology and Chinese parts. And this is also because one reason is because the U.S. defense industry it's designed not to make weapons that fight war. It's designed to make weapons that sucks the maximum amount of money from everybody else and divert it to the top 1%, to all the shareholders of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, etc. So the F-35 is designed to be as expensive as possible, as all those missiles as well. It's not designed for efficiency, and that's a difference between, say, the Iranian and Chinese system. They actually designed to fight to win, and so this is but from Iranian side, they also need a respite. That's why they accepted the ceasefire deal, because one of the problem that was exposed is how infiltrated they were by the Mossad, and they got the Mossad knew exactly where their nuclear scientists live, where the Iranian military leadership lived, and they had spies inside the country launching drone attacks from Iran itself. So Iran needs the time to clean the house. And another thing they need to do is they need to build up their air force and air defense system. Iran, they kind of gave up on their air force for a while because they have been under decades of Western sanction. They wouldn't, and they're. So that's why Israeli Air Force had the air dominance. They were able to fly into Iran to bomb all the Iranian missile launching sites. And that also reduced the amount of the missiles that Iran could send to hit Israel. Which, by the way,
Carl, what you said was facilitated by some Arab countries. And I am in a process. By the way, guys, I will do a video separately for you. But there are Arab countries that have facilitated that particular attack on Iran. It shows you how hypocritical those Arab countries.
Yeah, I mean, like, first of all, this is all part of the plan, by the way. First they destabilized Syria. They did a regime change in Syria, so they have no problem flying over the Syrian airspace anymore. And then there's also Jordan. Jordan is basically the loyal vassal of United States and Israel. So when the Iranian missiles were flying on their way to Tel Aviv, Jordanian Air Force, they scrambled to intercept incoming Iranian drones and missiles, right? So think about this for a moment. Israel has probably the world's most sophisticated layered missile defense. When the Iranian missiles fly toward Israel, first the Jordanians, doing their puppy dog the thing for United States, scramble their air force and air defense to try to shoot down those missiles. And once those missiles makes over, they're faced by the U.S. THAAD system, try to shoot them down. And then if they made through that, there's a U.S. And the missile shield deployed from the U.S. ship parked on the eastern side of Mediterranean. And those missiles try to shoot down the Iranian missile. If they get through that, the final piece is the Iron Dome of Israel trying to shoot them down. So the fact that this world's most sophisticated missile shield was useless. Because if you think about it, if only 30% of the missiles make through, think about what that would mean for a U.S. aircraft carrier battle group in the Western Pacific. If only 30% of the missile makes through, that means those aircraft carriers are toast. They're toast. This is why despite the rhetorics of U.S. pivot to Asia, they're going to come from China. If you look at what's actually happening to the ground on the troop deployment, they're actually pulling back. They're pulling back from the first island chain, which is Okinawa, Japan, and then they're pulling back to Guam because they understood everything, all the U.S. bases in the first island chain, this island chain that stretched from Japan down to
all the way
South Korea, Okinawa, Taiwan, Philippines. All those U.S. bases will be toast by Chinese missile barrage based in China. And so this is why they're retreating to the second island chain, which is Guam, centered around Guam. So this is a real lesson. And speaking of the Arab countries, one major piece of this Trump-Israeli joint effort in reshaping the Middle East is Abraham Accords, extension of Abraham Accords. And you saw that big billboards that were displayed in Israel called the Abraham Shield that list all the Arab leaders. They're all looking at Trump in the center like he's the big daddy.
Like
right?
pathetic.
And among those Arab leaders also included the current leader of Syria, the terrorist
Giuliani.
The leader of al-Nusra of ISIS, the guy that U.S. used to have $15 million bounty on his head. He is now getting welcomed into this, the Abraham Shield program. But it's again that's fantasy. There's no going forward with the Abraham Accords extension, because given what Israel has done in Gaza, no Arab country leader can afford to be seen as weak on Israel at this point. Even if when they help Israel, it's kind of on the down low. They don't want to publicize it to the public because the public really don't like that. And so right now, Iran needs time to recuperate, to rebuild. This is what Israel is doing also, by the way. So the ceasefire is really a pause.
It wasn't about ceasefire. It was about it was about regrouping.
Exactly. It's a pause. So the both sides can regroup for round two. And for Iran, this is why, they did two things. First, they sent their foreign minister to Russia because they probably right now want the fast track on some of the weapon deliveries. Because before this, Iran had ordered air defense system S-300, S-400 from Russia. They also ordered a batch of Su-35 jet fighters from Russia, but
they never got those ones. They didn't get those ones, Carl.
They haven't been delivered, and this is the reason the Iranian airspace was wide open for the Israelis, because they don't have the air force, they don't have the air defense system, and so for whatever reasons they're not delivered. You maybe just because Russia right now is so focused on Ukraine, and their military industrial complex is geared towards the Ukraine conflict right now. It might be a production bottleneck. It might be there might be some deal that's being worked out. I don't know. Like some people say, maybe this is why exchange for the West only sent the second-hand F-16s to Ukraine. For whatever reason, there was held up of the air defense system and air force and plane delivery to Iran. Then following that, Iranian defense minister made his first trip to China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. And that is important because there's now many widespread talks of Iran is in talks with China to acquire J-10C fighter jets and Chinese defense systems, because especially after witness the aftermath of the Pakistani-Indian conflict,
that is correct,
place recent, it really kind of show how Chinese weapon system can be cost effective, because those J-10Cs they only cost like 40 to 50 million a piece. It's the cheapest in its category, but they will, with the not J-10C, Iran can deal with Israel's F-16 effectively.
Yeah.
And,
if they were able, if the Pakistanis were able to shut down the Rafales, which Rafales for France considered one of the top in the world, and the Chinese missiles were, just zoomed at it, I make more sense for the Iranians to go ahead. And I'm not saying they should forgo about Russia, but you have a more affordable weapon from China, more technical advanced and reliable weapon you can count on.
Well, I mean, they already pay for their Su-35. Russia just need to deliver them. They're still waiting on the delivery. Yeah, they already pay for the Su-35. Their pilots have been trained on the Su-35. So they're literally just waiting for delivery. So I think right now they're probably working with Russia to try to help, help fast track those delivery of those systems. And but Russia's, their supplying of Iran, they also is tempered by their consideration of the Russia relationship with Israel and United States, right? Whereas China, there's less inhibition on China's part, because people were saying, well, if China supplies, wouldn't they have to consider the diplomatic fall of supplying weapons to Iran? What about China's relationship with Israel and United States? Well, first, let's talk about United States. What relationship? The U.S. is still supplying arms to Taiwan. So there's no reason for China not to supply Iran as long as United States keep on supplying weapons with Taiwan. The U.S. just finally deliver some F-16s to Taiwan, which the Taiwan has paid like a decade ago. They just finally deliver. And again, U.S. has a production issue. They have a production. Like I said, U.S. can print money as much as they want, but they cannot print fighter jets, ships, and missiles. The U.S. economy has been so financialized, but when you want to fight a kinetic war, what you actually need is still industrial capacity, which U.S. simply don't have anymore.
Don't have that.
And when it comes to China's relationship with Israel, so back in the 1980s and 1990s, Israel was a vector through which China could access Western military technology. Because Israel, they have full access to U.S. military technology. So Israel was a backdoor for China to get their hands on those U.S. military technology. But back in around 2000, U.S. put a stop to that, which kind of goes to show maybe we can't really say Israel control United States, because on the thing that really matters to U.S. can actually put its foot down and tell Israel, no, you cannot sell weapons to China anymore, and you stop. So from 2000 to 2010 onward, that door has been closed. So China no longer needs Israel to get hands on Western tech. And by the way, and so Israel needs China far more than China needs Israel. So that's not even that's not even a factor. The only factor China may need to consider is to balancing out the GCC, the other Arab countries, because Saudis, it might have concern. But again, that's not really a big concern, because China can offer the same defense package to the Saudi as well. I mean, Saudi is more than welcome to buy J-10C for themselves, and there's actually talks of some Arab countries, some Middle Eastern country, not Pakistan, that's also in talks with China to acquire J-35 as they became in production. And so that I'm guessing could be anyone, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and this is
actually is Egypt, Carl, is Egypt. Egypt already requested. Egypt, to my knowledge, the Saudis sort of refrained from that, even though there were talks. I remember when I was in Saudi Arabia, I came across back then an information that was like alarming at the time. Why the Saudis are talking to the Chinese for that? So I will see it more with the Egyptians than I'll see it with the Saudis at this moment. So things could change, of course.
That makes sense, because Chinese Air Force recently was in Egypt doing a joint
Yes.
drill with the Egyptian Air
Yes.
Force. They flew over the pyramids. I saw the videos. It was
Yeah.
quite impressive.
They make more sense
like
to that.
so Egypt is thinking about they're looking at J-10C and J-35. So that's something that Iran also need to think about, you know, because with the J-10C they can counter the Israeli F-16s. With J-35 they will be able to deal with the Israeli F-35.
35s. That's correct.
Can you imagine the copian if a J-35 shot down an F-35? That will be, you know, that will be the day. I look forward to the day when an Iranian J-35 shoot down an Israeli F-35. That will be the.
You know what, Carl? You know, when this conflict started, and I shared it with the community, I told them that, Mike, my word on this. If this to keep going on this trajectory, this will be the final nail on the coffin for the U.S. and Israeli partnership in the region. In other words, the Middle East or West Asia will never be the same because Iran is going to respond, and Iran's responding is going to change the equation. And at that time, everybody's saying, no, the Israelis will wipe out the Iranians. I said, no, you guys don't realize what Iran is doing. Iran is not playing all its cards. This is why the Israelis have been asking for a halt, because they were nervous. And you are right when you said earlier about the economic devastation. This morning, I got a confirmation that so far its economy has lost about $5 billion. This is for the Israeli part. So it became clear as to where things are going.
And Iran has been very restrained. They carry out a very calibrated measure campaign. Look, they could have done so much work. You know, if they really want to hit they're actually very careful not to hit the jugular of Israel, because they know if they do something that will collapse, if the Israel's imminent collapse is visible, then Washington for sure will enter the war decisively on the side of Israel, because U.S. simply will not allow Israel to collapse. So Iran, you know, if you really want to collapse Israel, they could hit the Israeli desalination plant, because 80 to 90% of Israel's water come from a handful of desalination plants. You know, Iran can just send their missiles that way. No water. That, you know, Israel will not be able to function after a week without water. And they refrain from hitting Israeli nuclear power plant, right? I mean, like they're perfectly within their capability to do so, because you know, people will say, "Oh, hitting civilian infrastructure, that's a war crime." Well, guess what? Israel has been doing for the whole year, and this is actually NATO playbook. When they bombed Serbia back during the Kosovo War, they bombed the civilian power plants, water plants, bridges, radio tower, television station, you know,
and the Chinese embassy,
and the Chinese embassy. So Iran, if they did that, you know, there's Israel would expect no sympathy from the war, right? I mean, like, like if anything, people will be cheering. But Iran refrained from doing that, because they know if they hit the nuclear power plant, if they hit the water desalination plant, that would definitely trigger a very strong U.S. response, because U.S. would not allow Israel to collapse. So Iran did is they are punishing Israel by making it suffer a lot of pain, but not to the point where it will cause imminent Israeli collapse. So that's whereas Iran, because a larger country is more spread out, more population, it can take a much more blows than Israel could. So right now, Iran, it also exposed a couple weaknesses in Iran's defense, which is their air defense and their air force. I imagine that right now it's their top priority to rebuild those capabilities, you know, before the next round. And for Israel's side, right now, I bet they're scrambling to replenish their missile interceptors because they're running dangerously low. And I don't know how that's going to be resolved, because they depend on United States. And let's face it, U.S. still have their own resource constraint. You know, they still have they need to figure out how they're going to get enough critical minerals to make those missiles.
Liking this video so far? Don't just be a watcher. Go ahead and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And don't forget to tap the bell so you will not miss any of my videos or live streams. This way, you will be supporting a channel that stands for the truth and objective reporting. The choice is yours. Thanks for your support.
All right, let's move on to another line of questions. You mentioned India earlier. I'm going to address that later on with you about, especially vis-a-vis BRICS. We'll talk about that later. But there is one particular aspect that I want to really, I saved this for you, Carl, because I knew I was going to reach out to you towards the end of the month, and especially when the conflict started. And I wanted to get your take into this. And this one has to do with the sort of the reports that have been emerging in both London and Washington that China has been providing weapons to Iran, and the lies that's been. And it was none other. And I digged into this to find out, first of all, one person is this one right here. Her name is Sophia Yang. She is of a Chinese descent. She works as an international correspondent for The Telegraph. And it was a lie based on what she's saying. Basically, what she was saying is that there were a flight coming out of China to Iran, a cargo planes carrying weapons and so forth. First of all, I did track some flights that goes on a weekly basis, and they make stop in Turkmenistan. I remember when I used to fly on behalf of the US government, we will always make stops in Baku. That was normal. We'll stop there for 3 hours, refuel. Some of us will step outside in a tarmac, just take walks. Then we'll take off and keep going. So that was one on that end. Second one was a particular clip from, and I'm going to share it with you guys if you allow me here briefly. Let me get to it. For none other than Gordon Chang. That's the one who said, let's take a listen here, guys. Okay, pardon me here. All right, let me share screen and I'll get your take on it, Carl. So there we go.
Meanwhile, Russia and China both condemning the U.S. operation Midnight Hammer. The U.S. adversary is proposing that the UN Security Council adopt a resolution for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in the Middle East. Officials in Beijing said the move, quote, seriously violates the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and international law and exacerbates tensions in the Middle East. Joining me now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, interesting that China is coming out with all of these comments, no mention of the fact that they were a week away from having 9 nuclear bombs. Talking about
yes, and also
international law.
Yes, and also no mention that China made sure that Iran had everything it needed to build a nuclear device.
Which is a lie.
Directly to Iran. Also, they armed Pakistan, and then Pakistan merchandised it to Iran with the knowledge and approval of China. And I think the United States.
That's a lie. That is a lie. First of all, Iran was never closer to having 9 bombs. Second, China never authorized or even talked to the Pakistanis to send or give any nuclear, whatever. Here is what I want to get your take on, Carl, is when you see reports coming from Washington like this one, and the reports by Sophia Yang on the Telegraph. By the way, guys, I'm going to put the link for you in the chat box, and you can read the article yourself later on. So when you see stuff coming like this, what does it signal to you? What does it tell you?
Well, it tells me the U.S. have a China derangement syndrome, right? Like you have articles like saying like U.S. need to win this war in Middle East against Iran because of China, because 89% of Iranian oil goes to China, so this will hurt China by cutting them off on cheap Iranian oil. this is all crazy talk. Well, first of all, let me address the Sophie Yang piece. Sophie Yang is she's ethnic Chinese. She's what journalist Yasha Levine would call a weaponized immigrants. This is what the empire does. They weaponize those diaspora immigrants. Present you with like a Chinese face. And that's what Gordon Chang is. He's the most marketable part of him is because he's a Chinese face talking about all those anti-China talking points. So they can plausibly say, we're not racist. Look, it's Gordon Chang. And Gordon Chang has been failing upwards since 2001 when first he published Coming Collapse of China. He has been updating the dates on that coming part for
and about the collapse of China. I've been hearing it for over a decade now.
I mean, for Gordon Chang, it's almost a quarter of century, right? He did that in 2001, and you're right. The flight was a regular flight from China that makes one stop in Turkmenistan and on its way to Luxembourg.
That is correct.
And everybody, like people actually had to verify that. They even find the flight number and everything. Yeah, it was just a regular flight, like a passenger flight. Nothing mysterious about it. And again, they're trying to paint this is kind of the U.S. derangement syndrome. Now U.S. based all its foreign policies based on opposing China, contain China, whether it's in Middle East, Africa, Ukraine. You see all these talks about we must win in Ukraine to stop China from taking over Taiwan, right? I mean, like this is nuts. And but you know what? The prevalent internet meme in China is that Gordon Chang is actually a Chinese spy. His job is to spread disinfo to Americans, so that Americans will consistently underestimate China because he keep on saying China will collapse.
Yeah.
But this Gordon Chang is selling the typical right wing talking point. China is simultaneously collapsing and yet threatening, right? This is like literally like a fascist talking point about their enemy. The enemy is always both collapsing and threatening at the same time. And that's what they say about China. It has no relationship to reality. So China, for its part, it's right now. It's obviously China do not want Iran to fail. Let's make that clear. China do not want Iran to fail the same way China do not want Russia to fail. This is the reason why China is taking in more than 89% of Iranian oil export, even though Iranian oil is under international sanction. And the way this was achieved is by, this is by the so-called dark fleet. These unregistered ships, they will go to Iran, they load up the ship, and they change their load and unload in some other location, like in some Southeast Asian countries, and then they rebrand those oil as coming from elsewhere, from Malaysia or Indonesia, and they send them to private independent refineries in China, mostly locally in Shandong province. Now, those private independent refineries, sometimes called the teacup refineries, they do that because they are willing to risk a U.S. sanction for the margin, because they get the Iranian oil at a 15% discount. And for them, that's enough margin for them to risk sanction. And those private Chinese refineries, because their market is China, they don't have much exposure overseas. So U.S. sanction can't touch them because all their transaction is done in Chinese yuan. So U.S. financial sanction that doesn't impact them. Their customer is Chinese. They're selling in China. They conduct their business in yuan, and so that's where 89% of Iranian oil goes. How it ends up in China. But if Chinese government really wants to, they could easily shut that down, but they didn't. They chose look the other way. Even though those independent private refinery actually compete with China's state-owned oil companies, because they're actually competitors. For the state-owned oil company like Sinopec, they probably want to shut down those operations because they're competing with them. But China decided to look the other. Chinese government is looking the other way, allowing those private refiners to take Iranian oil because they understand this is a very important lifeline for Iran. So that's how China supports, just like the same way China supported Russia. But China would not flying weapons into Iran in the middle of the conflict. I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, why didn't China and Russia do more to help? First of all, you don't need to speak on behalf of Iran. If Iran need help, they can ask help. They would have asked for it from Iran and from Russia and China. They didn't, because on their own, Iran can handle Israel. No, Israel, they can handle Israel on their own. Like the only scenario where Iran would need help if U.S. directly gets involved. Then, but before that happened, it's like Iran is not in a hurry to get help from. They're not panicking. They're like the problem is a lot of the BRICS and the multipolarity supporters. They get easily spooked and panic because they in their mind they still think U.S. is this powerful Captain America, invincible. That will stomp on all our position. But you need to understand, U.S. is just like any other country. They also operate under resource and supply constraint, and there's real serious resource constraint on the U.S. empire at the moment when they're essentially involving a two-front war. There's still a proxy conflict that's raging in Ukraine right now, and the fact that they had to shuffle around their air defense system from Ukraine to Israel tells you they do not have resources for a two-front war, and this is why Iran they got Israel handled on their own, no problem. And what happened with the U.S. involvement? It turns out it's a very typical Trump enterprise. This is precedent for this too. In the Trump first term, that's exactly what he did. He launched cruise missiles against Syria. When he was under a lot of pressure by the deep state to do that, he just fired a bunch of missiles and he claimed victory. I did it. And he changed very little facts on the ground, right? But for Trump, it's all about PR. And Trump is unpredictable, but he's so predictable in his ways. This is why I called it dude, this guy is going to do a symbolic strike and claim victory. And then because for him, it's more important to deport immigrants in Los Angeles than to deal with East Quagmire stuff. And so I think you're right. And this is people in the Middle East are also going to wake up to the fact that, for the decades, the assumption was with the U.S. support, Israel is kind of unstoppable. It's going on rampage. But now, for the first time, first time, it showed Israel cannot do its aggression with impunity. For the first time, they're getting missile rained on them on Tel Aviv and in Haifa, and in a serious number. So this is why Israel Defense Ministry put out statements like, "Oh, our war with Iran is not over, but we need to shift our focus on Gaza." They're focusing on their core competence right now. That's genocide, right? Genocide, that's their core competence. They can't really fight against a nation that can fight back.
Defenseless people. They don't have anything to fight for. And that's why shame on the Arab leaders, because maybe they need another Arab Spring. And as I said, guys, I will do a special video for you just regarding this one here. So now, before I'll move on to next one, Carl, I want just to say one thing regarding the oil. About China, I'm sure you're aware that Mr. Trump said now China can buy oil from Iran. It's like, who the heck are you to give the green light to countries to buy oil from whomever they want? So, but that just on a side note, I wanted to mention this. Now, on a serious note, and I want to mention this to you, Carl, and just get your take on it regarding the conflict that took place and still taking place in the Middle East, or West Asia, that is. Is this now, in your opinion, a defining moment for China regarding its role on the global stage? When I say global stage, I am referring to the global order, because China weighing in on something like this will have a tremendous consequence in either direction.
Well, I think it obviously shows. Even though the fact that those people, a lot of people are screaming for China to step in, is because, because everyone realized China can make a difference. They can tilt the power balance decisively in one direction. And this is why people say, oh, why did Xi Jinping deviate from Deng Xiaoping's policy? Deng Xiaoping's policy had been hide your strength, buy your time. Why is China suddenly abandon that? I'm like, look, when you are the world's largest producing power, we're the world's largest manufacturing superpower, where can you hide? How can you pretend you are like a helpless third world country? You can't hide your strength, because your strength is plenty obvious for everyone to see. And right now, China is progressing all fronts in technology, in the military hardware, in economy. This is why there's a lot of panic in Washington, because they really see China threatening the dominant U.S. position worldwide. But all the response, they try to put a stop to that, try to stop China's progress, hasn't worked. And this is why they keep on giving airtime to people like Gordon Chan, because Gordon Chan tells them fairy tales that they like to hear, which is China is collapsing. It's this terrible, bad China that's very threatening, that's trying to do harm to us. But don't worry, they're collapsing. And because Gordon Chan tells them what they want to hear. This is why he has been, on CNN, on Fox News for 24 years, even though none of, he has suffered no real world consequences for all his bullshit, because even though he turned out to be wrong years after year, just because he is selling copium. That's what U.S. excels right now. The only one area where U.S. still lead China in the production is the production of copium.
Wow. That's very, very interesting. Even in my days in Washington, and I was like, what is this guy spewing nonsense? And I was like, even the argument I made back then, Carl, and I kid you not, I still have a good friend still alive that I talked to back in 1991 when I started a conversation. And I said, do people in Washington aware of what lies ahead in the next 25 years? They're like, what are you talking about? It's like, you don't see what's coming, do you? And they didn't get it. So you kind of, when people couldn't understand the basics, you can get into some depth conversation with, because you realize you're going to just be wasting your energy. It might be useful to use it for something else.
David, in 1991, that was the year of the end of history. That's when Francis Fukuyama published the end of the history.
That is correct.
This is the ultimate end of the human evolution. Is America, with America sitting on top of the world. That's what people seriously bought into. Back then it was. But again, that was also a comforting fairy tale, and now we're just seeing that right now.
Yeah, what surprised me of all this, like the likes of Fukuyama and even Gordon Chang, they don't have the audacity nor the courage to come forward and say, you know what, I was wrong, or I am wrong. I mean, we all make mistakes. You could have your analysis sometimes off, not to a degree, but you know what you're talking about. But when you make a mistake, it's a sign of courage when you step forward and say, you know what, I made a mistake. My assessment was off. But not to keep spewing the lies. which that's why it didn't make sense to me when they saying
Well,
about
the lie is how Gordon Chang makes rent. That's how he gets paid.
Well, that's a
He's
pathetic
getting
way
paid for that.
That is a pathetic way, Carl. Better find something decent instead of just lying about all that stuff. So anyway, I want to tackle one last thing before I'll check if there's, by the way, guys, if you have any question for Carl, I will answer some super sticker questions. If you have one for Carl, we'll take that one. But let me share this screen here, Carl, and I want to take your insight on it. Take a look here. This, it says, Xi to skip BRICS meeting because Brazil to host state dinner for Modi. I am floored when I read this the first time that Brazil has lost its mind by hosting a state dinner for India, which didn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
I mean, this is bilateral relation between Brazil and India, and I think it's China is not that petty. Okay, for China is not that petty. They will not cancel a visit by a leader just because of something like that. This is actually reminding me what India did recently at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India refused to endorse a joint statement because it failed to include this clause that India want to insert about terrorism. But the terrorism clause is really not about terrorism, because Shanghai Cooperation Organization originally was founded by Russia, China, and the Central Asian republics to fight terrorism. That was the original founding mission. So what India really wanted to do, they wanted to use this forum to cast shade on Pakistan, right? Because India accused Pakistan of supporting terrorists, that latest terrorist attack in Kashmir, again without evidence, without evidence. So they want to use that forum, which, by the way, Pakistan was also a Shanghai SCO member. They want to use that to diss Pakistan. Of course, they decide not to include that, and India decide to reject this joint statement. So that's pity. That's pity. I mean, I don't know why Xi Jinping didn't cancel. I mean, my first guess will be more maybe a health reason. For something like that, but we don't know. I don't know. I'm not privy to Xi Jinping the health checks. So that does show China's importance. People paying attention if China was not present, and people start to speculate. And speaking about China's importance, there was a recent article in the Foreign Affairs magazine called "Southeast Asia is starting to choose why the region is leaning toward China." I have said so many times on your show, David, that when Kishore Mubani was telling United States, "Don't force us to choose. Don't force us to choose between U.S. and China," what he's really saying is, if you really, really come down hard on us, we'll have to be forced to choose China, because that's where Southeast Asia's economic destiny lies. And right now, this is not just me talking about it. Now it's in the Foreign Affairs magazine. Southeast Asia is now forced to choose, and they chose China because it's no question. The United States is not offering economic development. The best they could do is military bases and sell you weapons. And for a lot of the Southeast Asian countries right now, economic development is the top priority. And that's an area where they need China to work with them, and China is more than willing to help. This is why Indonesia now have high-speed train running at 350 kilometers per hour, whereas the California high-speed rail is still a pipe dream. Like that. That's not the California high-speed rail was planned around the same time when the Chinese high-speed rail system I remember this because back in 2008, I lived in Los Angeles. I was dating a Japanese woman who worked at the Japanese consulate in Los Angeles, and her job was to host a Japanese businessman who came to LA to discuss with the government of California on Japanese participation in the high-speed rail project. Well, 2008, that's when China will first start building their high-speed rail. Look at the difference.
That's for sure. As well, speaking of that about the South Asia shift and so forth, for what Kishore was mentioning. Also, my good friend, Dr. Dashan Fang, he was in a panel. He was moderating a panel. And this one, they were talking about the tectonic shifts in the global talent chain. We're talking about even technology, and I couldn't agree more that, as they wrote, and I quote here, there is no doubt with the convoluted 21st century geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape, there is no doubt technology and geopolitics are impacting Asian higher education, both its landscape and operations. So they are moving into the direction. By the way, guys, if you are interested in watching this video, I'm going to put it for you in the chat box here. You can check it out later on. Very, very informative to give you an idea why we have a problem here in America now with the exodus of the brains. A lot of scientists of Chinese descent are returning back to China. A lot of people are considering leaving. I am one of those in the plan to consider teaching in China, not in the US, not in Europe. I've kind of made up my mind on that. So just matter of time. But there is this massive exodus of the brains that is now moving. I think it's becoming clear, Carl, where things are headed. So it's just the way it is. And there is no other way of expressing it. The question that I've always wondered, how will the United States deal with this new change in the global order? China is at the top, whether we like it or not. It just matters now of whether we're going to cooperate with China or whether we're going to go into a fight. Well, it became clear we couldn't defeat the Houthis. What makes us think we're going to defeat the Chinese? The Chinese also became clear to them. We can see now what we can do to the Americans if they ever, because it became clear. So choice is ours now, I believe. So final word, Carl. I'll give you the last word before I'll take some questions from the audience here. How do you see this play out regarding the changes in the Middle East, but mainly how do you see the role of China in really guiding? Because we are already in a multipolar order. There is no if. We are already in it. And how do you see the role of China into navigating this new trajectory?
Well, you see that already. Even Saudis, they're hedging, right? They're hedging. I mean, Saudi has one of the closest ties with the United States traditionally. That was the foundation of the petrodollar, but they're the ones that's hedging. But all the talks about them talking to Chinese buying weapon system right now, I think that's just a way to remind Washington, say like, look, we have options. If you don't take account of our position, we can still turn to China. So they're still using China as kind of bargaining chips for their relationship with Washington. But China is already becoming much more important in this region, and I think in other Southeast Asia, it's already the only country in Southeast Asia that that still prefer United States is at least at the top level, leadership level, is only country is Philippines. Philippines is the only country that stood out. But the rest of Southeast Asia has already kind of chosen their side. And U.S., despite its talks about pivot to Asia, we're talking about pivot to East Asia. It's all rhetorics. If you look at the actual military deployment, they're already retreating. United States is already retreating from the first island chain second island chain. If you like take a historical perspective, back in 1970s, during the height of Vietnam War, the whole South China Sea was American lake back then. You know, because U.S. had military bases in the Philippines, in Vietnam, on both sides of South China Sea, and they had United States actually stayed 2 aircraft carrier group permanently in South at that time on permanent year-round rotation in South China Sea, and this was that's now they try to insert themselves, doing this kind of irrelevant freedom of navigation patrol, but that's all for show. That's all PR, because they also realize their position within the first island chain, which runs from Japan, Okinawa, Philippines, and Taiwan. It's untenable. And recently, China actually sent 2 aircraft carrier attack groups to do their own freedom of navigation patrol around Guam to remind United States we now have freedom to roam around the second island chain. And this is the reality that U.S. Is coming to grip with. This is why even Marco Rubio has admitted now we're living a multipolar world. So I think there was still a lot of rhetorics about pivoting to China and contain China, but the capability is not there. And if you look at the time window that the U.S. military says there might be a war with China, the first estimate was surfaced in a 2023 report when the U.S. general said there might be war with China in 2 years.
In 2025. I remember
so that's
that.
this year. That's this year. Well, we still have 6 months, but I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. And later, the advice, move the date to 2027. Right, and I think this is going to be like a Gordon Cham project. You know how Gordon Cham
to 30.
moving the date of calming collapse with China. They're going to keep on moving the date of calming conflict with China every 2 years, right? And because they have to. So I think this is because one of the reasons those dates even get floated in the first place, because a lot of U.S. Pentagon planners, they realize, have a very short time window to contain China, but I don't think that right now. I think we already passed that window. I think that window has already closed.
That's for sure.
Right now, I mean, like China is already has. They reached the escape velocity. It's like there's not much U.S. can do at this point to contain China, especially when the empire still is enmeshed in Ukraine, in Middle East. Like Trump, his instinct is to extricate United States from the Ukraine conflict, but he wasn't able to do it, despite saying he would do it in 24 hours.
Phone call.
24 hours. One
phone call.
He can't do it, and this is because after a while the empire, it takes a life of its own. All this bureaucracy, all the NATO bureaucracy, all these think tankers, their jobs, their career depends on it. And so it's a self-perpetuating machine, and so I think we're gonna continue to see this kind of slow decline of the American empire unfolding in our eyes. I don't think there will be a war with China, just because there's not, the capability is not there. U.S. doesn't like. One thing I agree with Mearsheimer is he said intention doesn't matter. It's all about capability. Well, guess what? The U.S. capability to do mischief right now is decreasing, and it's decreasing in relativity to China year by year. So I think we're good. I think we're good. I mean, maybe not so good if people live in the U.S., but I think for the rest of the world, I'm positive. I'm fairly positive for the intermediate and long-term future.
Well, that is, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Carl, as far as how things are here in the U.S. And I look at it from the academic perspective. A lot of individuals that I know, talk to, and the consideration of teaching elsewhere is becoming more evident. So it's just because the education system in itself is not conducive anymore. So anyway, guys, I'm going to put the link for you right here on the screen, but I'm going to put it in the chat box for you to go check out Carl's YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe there. I'm going to put it right there in the chat box for you. I am also going to show you Carl's Twitter handle, X. I follow him on X, so make sure you follow him on that. He posts some stuff. By the way, Carl, thanks for posting about the verdict on the, what was he, governor, the guy who got involved in bribes in China for stealing. You know, I wish my country has a fair justice system like that. I really wish.
Yeah, he got convicted to life sentence for taking $17 million in bribe. I'm like, dude, that's chump change for our U.S. Congress people. Like, if we go by that standard, the entire Congress will be wiped out.
Which will be good. So yeah. Let's say thank you to our key supporters here. Tom, you see, greetings to Carl, Zha, and Dr. L from Canada. I will be visiting Beijing and Nanjing in China from October 17th to October 24th. So you'll be missing the first week of the national holiday in China, a major holiday. By the way, you have about 500 million people traveling within China. That's 500 million people. Imagine what that's going to do to the economy. So safe travels to you, and thank you very much for your kind support. So Julia, I want to say thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate you, and it means a lot to us or here at the community. So Harry Local, here you are. Go Karza. Harry Local, Carl, lives in the Netherlands. He's an avid supporter. And so I thank you so much, Harry, for your super sticker. And last one is from Raphael Legond, another avid supporter of the channel. Guys, pardon me, my take is she is getting tired of Putin timidity. She is tired of Putin not showing up. Putin kissing Trump as China likes standing up man. So interesting comment.
Well, I think Russia has its own priority at this moment. Its priority is Ukraine. That's where all the Russia's focus is going to be.
It's and Russia's focus is regional now. So that is where for Russia is.
Exactly. Yeah. Russia is focusing on upgrading its own military hardware, and it's focusing on the new style of 21st century warfare. Because like really, the only 21st century war right now is Ukraine. Like they have way more experience now than the NATO forces, because the whole Zhong affair that was evolved, that was just something that was never seen before, and that's what Russia gonna be focused on for the immediate future. I think China understands that. I mean, China has its own priorities. China's own priorities focus on its economic development, and and they will continue to do that. People need to understand, when China and Russia are actually they're upholder of the post-World War order. It's the United States that's trying to destroy it right now. U.S. is the one that helped to build the post-World War order. But U.S. government find that increasingly is now working to its advantage. So now it's trying to destroy it, try to replace it with the so-called rule-based international order, where the rule is whatever they say it's going to be, right? Yeah. So this is a world we're entering into.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, thank you all for your kind super stickers and support for the channel. Carl, I can't thank you enough, my friend, for really carving out time for us here to share your knowledge with the community. They always get excited once they know you're coming. And they know by now, the end of the month is time with Carl Zha. So I, on behalf of the community, I say thank you so much. And I look forward to our conversation next time. You take care, my friend.
Thank you, David.
All right. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Carl is always very, very informative to listen to. And that's why I usually cannot wait for the end of the month to have this overall conversation on a host of issues. That's what